Good morning, grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka Blender HD. If you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Tuesday, August 23rd. And we got baseball today. We got stuff going on. I'm in the middle of recording the first couple of chapters of the new version, the advanced players version of the theory of daily fantasy sports. How to think like a professional DFS player. If you want to get the beginner, if you want to call it the beginner's version, the original, right? The starter version, go to theoryofdfs.com. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass. Teaches you all the game theory concepts of DFS, regardless of the sport. So go pick that up because you're gonna need the information in here to kind of get the information in the advanced players course. So that's why I'm kind of pushing that here. We've been working on it. James has been working on tools for the past month or so. I've been working. I'm starting the recording today. I have everything outlined. I have a whole. It's multiple pages long of bullet points and everything. So that I don't know how long it's going to be. Probably somewhere between 10 and 15 hours. In addition to the Excel tools that will be available to you, and two of which, a couple of these tools are not even available. Like I think two of them don't even actually exist anywhere in the industry, and then there's a couple that do exist, but you probably have to have like your own version of it. You have to run it yourself, type of thing. So I want to show off some of that stuff. James is working some of the display things. So I have like the first draft, kind of the beta versions of it, showing off that this week. Hopefully we get this out the door by next week, or at least by NFL season. So give me those thumbs ups, thummy thumbs in the morning. You know how much I love the thummy thumbs. Good morning, guys in the chat. Wata, Suki Singh, Chris Aarons, MJC, Doug L, Mr. Richard, right? Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. But yeah, so some of the tools that James has made, very, very helpful, or at least if they're not completely applicable for your day's play in DFS, at least highlights and shows like proof of the concepts that are inside the class. Like for instance, the difference between a blunt, like we talk a lot about. I talk a lot about blunt methodologies versus precise methodologies. Now, precise methodologies, most are not available to you, right? You have to work that out yourself. Blunt, plenty. But how to use blunt methodologies to win at DFS? Blunt methodology, what are we talking about when we talk about blunt methodologies? Like the most blunt methodology on like player projections would be for you to make up your own numbers. Right, make up. What do I think is Ronald Acuna is going to do today? 14 points. Like that would be the most blunt, and of course, it would be the least accurate. He's facing this pitcher, he's doing this thing. You're putting together all these variables, and then you're coming up with a number, and then who knows how accurate that number is in the long run. And that is what you think is going to happen. Not let alone a range of outcomes. How often does Ronald Acuna get 0 today? How often does Ronald Acuna get 28 today? How often does Ronald Acuna get 3 today? How often does he get 5 today? Good luck coming up with those numbers yourself, right? What's the more precise way of coming up with those numbers? Well, actually building your own projection model, actually running your own simulations of players. Well, we have that here at RotoGrinders. Like we have whether or not you're using the Plate IQ projections or the Bat X projections from Derek Carty. Like these are more precise. Are they 100% accurate? No, nothing's 100% accurate. This isn't. There's no R of 1 here. Are they more accurate than you doing it in your head? Absolutely. So this would be considered a precise, a more precise methodology. A blunt methodology would be like deciding how much total ownership in your lineup, like ownership sum. Now, obviously, the ownership projections are more precise than you doing them in your head, but playing lineups based on a total number of ownership is not a precise way of judging the quote leverage in your lineup. It's not a precise way. It's a blunt way. It's better than doing nothing, right? It's better than trying to come up with it in your head. But like, you wouldn't actually know, for instance, let's say if we ran 2 lineups, okay? Let's say you're playing cash games in MLB, right? Where you don't really care that much about correlation. You kind of just want to play the highest median projected lineup that you can. That has a, that gets you a 50th percentile outcome, that type of thing. So you run 2 lineups, and you go, okay. You go, well, I can play one or the other, right? Like the top 2 lineups. One is 113.28. One is 113.26. Then you look at the ownership and you go, well, this lineup on top is owned much more than the lineup underneath. Now, in a GPP, you'd much rather play the second lineup, right? To get the same amount, virtually the same amount of median points for less total ownership. That's a blunt way of figuring out which lineup, when ownership matters. I'm not saying it matters in cash games. When it matters in GPPs, why wouldn't you want the same amount of points for less total ownership? But total ownership isn't like the be-all, end-all, right? Basically, this lineup up here has a 53% owned AJ Pollock, right? Based on our projections, I guess. Is that a mistake? I don't know. I'm just using the numbers that are in here right now. This one doesn't, but the projection difference isn't dramatic. So in GPPs, you'd much rather, for relative value purposes, have the lower owned lineup. But how do you prove that? Now, in the long run, lower owned total lineups have more relative value than higher owned lineups with the similar projections. But on this given slate, based on, do you know on the exact range of outcomes of all these players, whether or not 35 to 40 points of ownership is worth 0.2 points in projection? Now, from a directional standpoint, yes, right? They're dramatically different in ownership. Enough. It's not like we're talking about 10 percentage points in ownership, 5 percentage points in ownership. But just looking at total ownership is a blunt methodology. Like, I'm just highlighting this. Like, oh, we want to play lineups that have the highest projection for the lowest ownership. Like, that in and of itself is a blunt methodology, because we're not simulating any outcomes. We're not pitting 2 lineups together. We're not taking, hey, what do we think the lineups are going to be in this 20,000 entry contest? And then running all of those lineups with our lineup and seeing over 1 trial, over 5 trials, over 1,000 trials, over 10,000 trials, using the range of outcomes of all the players, the correlation coefficients of all the players, all the lineups that are in the contest, the payout structure of the contest, and figuring out an exact expected value of that lineup, of each lineup. And even then, that's not 100% accurate, because we're basing it around ownership percentages. So we're trying to figure out what the most likely lineups we're going up against. And also the player's range of outcomes is not 100% accurate, right? It's long run, 95% accurate, right? The range of outcomes is good. The ownership, maybe 90% accurate. So even then, there's wiggle room that, hey, if you simulate it out 1,000 times, there's less accuracy than simulating it out 100,000 times or 100 million times. Okay? Do you have access to even do that? Most don't, right? We don't offer it. It's typically, server intensive. That's why you typically you're not going to see these types of things available as far as, a web application. You probably have to run it on your own computer, on AWS or something like that. You could do it in Excel to some extent, right? But you're not going to know. So you're dealing with just blunt methodologies to know, well, if my competition in this contest is weak enough. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't contain sharp players, but if the overall skill of this contest is low enough where people aren't even doing the blunt methodologies, then the blunt methodologies is profitable. Will end up being profitable. At some point, maybe it's 10 years down the road, that the fields are not weak enough that even a blunt methodology turns a profit. That you need to be precise. But typically at that point, the rake will eat you up. The rake eats everyone up, right? A 15% rake on some of these contests. So that's why that's why on this show and in my courses, we talk about blunt methodologies. I'm not going to sit there and teach you Python and teach you how to run Monte Carlo sims in Excel. Like you could look that stuff up. You could kind of try to build something yourself, but it's not a computer programming course. It's how to win at DFS using blunt methodologies. But also, it's useful to have more precise methodologies incorporated into your arsenal. Even if you're just doing it just to, crazy check yourself. Well, if I play one lineup or the other, right? If you're trying to decide, I ran these two lineups, right? So the top two line, right? I just ran two. What's the difference between these two? We got Rodon Ray, Melendez versus Heim. We got Low there. We got Massey. We got Rivera. Okay, Brad Miller at shortstop instead of Seager. Nootbaar, Judge, Acuna. This is Cole, Calhoun, Pollock, and Acuna. So this is like a 4v4. So the difference between these two lineups is what? 4 different players? Judge, Nootbaar, Miller, Melendez. And this is Pollock, Calhoun, Seager, Heim, right? Instead of Melendez. So a 4v4. But the projection is not that different. The ownership is different. And then you're sitting there going, oh, I'm playing cash games. I'm playing double ups. I want to see which lineup is truthfully better than the other lineup. Because a lot of people will ask that. Which lineup is better? Would you rather play the first one or the second one in double ups? Right? A lot of times I lean towards I'd rather play the lineup that has the 53% owned guy. Right? Because if he does well, and even though my lineup is projected the same, like 53% of my opponents will have 30 points, and I'm kind of screwed. But that's not a mathematical answer. That's more of a risk tolerance answer. What's the actual answer? Well, let me switch over to this. Stop the screen. On StreamYard, you have to switch between like this. Let's see. Can I find this? Share. Okay. Let's see. Can I make it bigger? Okay, I think that's good enough, right? Well, James, for the theory of DFS, for advanced players, we have included, and James is going to make this a little bit more robust. He's changing some stuff this week that you could run more than 2 lineups. There may be up to 10 lineups. So what I've done is I've plugged in this Excel spreadsheet the projections for today, the bat projections. So I just basically cut and paste. Name, floor, median, ceiling, right? So you have here Freddie Freeman, 0.56 floor, median 8, ceiling 18.64, right? And just plug that in for everyone, right? You see, scroll down. I just cut and paste the columns. And then in this section, cut and paste 2 lineups. So here's that top lineup with Rodon and Heim and Seager and Calhoun and Pollock. And here's that second lineup with Nootbaar and Judge right here. And what this is going to do is is going to simulate these 2 lineups from a Monte Carlo. This doesn't take into account correlation. It only takes into account just a Monte Carlo of the player's range of outcomes each, with a little bit of randomness thrown in. So it just runs the 2 against each other 2,500 times. And it'll show you that the total combined floor of the first lineup is 83. Second lineup is 75. Like, do you see the median differences? The median differences, the ceiling differences, right? The lowest it scores, the highest it scores, the middle it scores, the standard deviation, and the win percentages. Now, between these 2 lineups, based on just 2,500 simulations, it's pretty much the same. Lineup 1 is slightly low, ever so slightly, that it doesn't even matter. Like within the rake, it doesn't even matter. 49% versus 48.92%. Right? You can cut and paste this again. You could have it run again. Sit out. Run it again. Right? 50% to 46%. Right? We could run this again. We'll have a button in there so you could run the simulations again. Because obviously in only 2,500 simulations, like you're gonna get some variance in there. If you ran it 100,000 a million times, it'll be a little bit more accurate. But of course, that'll take way more time in Excel. So if I cut and paste this again, let's go. Let's cut and paste this again. Control C. Control V. Right? 48.49. Do it again. 51.46. So we see that the second lineup, actually in a lot of 2,500 simulations, actually does maybe a little bit better. Right? But not that much. Not that much better. So if you were choosing between both these lineups, right, here's one, 49 to 48, 49.2 to 48.4. I know it's very small on your screen, probably. Right, here's 52 to 46. Right, we go again, 50 to 46. It seems like lineup 2 has maybe a higher ceiling than the first one. That's what it seems like, just a little bit. But of course, it doesn't contain the 53% on Pollock in it. So if you're choosing between the two lineups, all this is saying is that it's so close. Why are you bothering spending that much time even considering the difference between these two? And you go, oh, maybe the first one does have a higher floor. I mean, you can see that just in the lineups. The first one has a higher floor. Second one has a higher ceiling. Which one does better against each other? Well, the second one ends up winning a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Does that mean that you play that in cash games? No. But this is a tool that allow you to choose between two lineups. To pit two lineups. We'll make it that you could pit multiple lineups. I think James is adding so you could do up to 10 lineups against each other. So now for like, this would be like a cash game version of using this type of tool. Now imagine doing it for GPPs. So I'm going to go back, stop the screen, share the screen. I'm going to go back, and now I'm going to build GPP lineups. Okay? And we're not going to worry about necessarily correlation because this simulation is not going to care about correlation. So let's say I'm building 5-man stacks. Let's have a large spread between just running exposure percentage just to get a whole bunch of lineups. Okay? We're running 2 lineups. And let's say we run a Rangers line. It seems like a lot of Rangers today in the back projections. So where are the Rangers today? I'm trying to find 2 lineups that are very, very different from each other. So 50% Texas, and let's see what's the line, one of the lower totals on the slate. Let's see what's going on today. What's like a leverage play today? I get maybe the Reds against Ranger Suarez, maybe. Let's see, the Reds, the Tigers against Rodon. Okay, let's do the Tigers against Rodon, right? Because obviously Rodon's going to be a popular pitcher. The Tigers, where are the Tigers? Okay, so I'm just trying to get 2 lineups. So 50%. Let's see if it'll even run this. 2 lineups, 1 Ranger stack and 1 Tiger stack. Let's see if it does this. Okay, so here we go. 2 lineups that are different in projection by about 6.5 points. So here's Rodon, Ray, and a Ranger stack with Rivera, Nootbaar, and Pollock. Okay, obviously it's heavily owned. Then we have one that's 100 percentage points lower in ownership, 106.27. So it projects for a little 6.5 or so. This is Verlander, Ray, Haas, Cabrera, the Tiger stack, Rivera, Judge, Acuna. So really, it only shares, looks like it only shares 2 players, Ray and Rivera. So this is an 8v8 between these 2 lineups. Well, now if you were pitting these lineups against each other, just common sense wise, you have to expect the first one to win more than the second one against each other. Right? We're not talking about GPPs where the ownership, which comes in first. You'd have to simulate the contest for that, which Let's just say in Excel, you're not going to be able to do that very well. Okay, so let's export these two lineups and plug them in. How often does the first lineup beat the second lineup? Oh, I pressed the build button. Sorry. Let's export this. Because most people will look and go, wow, the first lineup must beat the second lineup. God knows how many times. Well, what's God knows how many? What is that number? Because the median projection difference is only 6.5. It's not 30. So what is that number? How often does the first lineup does beat the second lineup? Okay, so I'm gonna do this. Let's switch the screen again. Share screen. Go to my lineup sims right over here. I'm gonna cut and paste the first one. Okay, so we got the first one. Paste it over here. This one against whatever lineup we had underneath there. I don't know what that was. And then the second one with the Tigers stack. There we go. So the first one we see here on the screen, which is small, looks much bigger on my screen. Let's see. Can I zoom in? No, that doesn't necessarily zoom in. I don't know how to do this in Excel to get. Can I get it? Not close enough. Whatever. But we see here, the first lineup wins in this 2,500 trial simulation 58% of the time. 58 to 39.72. So the first lineup, lowest result was 81. Highest result was 162. The second lineup, lowest result was 72. Ceiling was 162. So like the ceilings were about the same. Obviously, the floor is much lower on the second lineup with the Tigers players in it. 58 to 39, almost 58 to 40. Let's plug it in again. Run it again. Okay, 57, 39. Right, we see the ceilings. We see the ceilings between these two lineups are not that different in the simulation. It's just that the floor is much lower. Let's plug it in and run it again. Right, okay. 58, 39. I mean, it's about 6. Let's just call it a 60-40. Now, if you went into the slate and you just said, it's like, oh, do I play Chalk Ranger stack and Carlos Rodon and Robbie Ray and whatever, and then you go, oh, but how would I play the Tigers stack against Robbie Ray? And people act as if you're like, oh my God, you're a crazy man. You're absolutely nuts to do that. I'm talking about in GPP, not in like cash games. So a lot of times the reaction is that, oh, okay, this lineup is good, but it's too chalky. You need to find something a little bit different, right? Well, I don't know about stacking the Tigers against Rodon. I don't think that's necessary. I think you're nuts. Are you really nuts to play a lineup that you look at and you go, well, I wish I could play this. It's just too high owned. And a lineup that you think is absolutely crazy. The difference is, look, 60-40. If you just pit the two lineups against each other, this lineup that you think is crazy will still win 40% of the time. You score more points than the other lineup. 40% of the time. So when people go, especially in baseball, we'll see a little bit different results on an NBA slate because the range of outcomes are much narrower. But imagine me telling you beforehand that the second lineup has as high of a ceiling as the first lineup. You'd think I'm nuts. People wonder why I play some of these, quote, nutso lineups, and they act like, oh my God, how do you ever win? It's like, yeah, I'm playing lineups that have less of a shot at beating other lineups, but they have so much less ownership. Once you factor in ownership into this, if I told you the first lineup is 187% total ownership, which is a blunt number, the second one is 81% total ownership, which is a blunt number. But in running these simulations in Excel, that the second lineup has about as high of a ceiling as the first lineup, why the hell wouldn't you play the second lineup over the first lineup in a large field GPP? Of course you would. Right? You could run this all you want. The difference between these two lineups, yes, the first lineup is better. But from a ceiling perspective, it's not that much better. Using the projections that we have. Obviously, you want to change the projections. You want to plug in whatever numbers the hell you want. Obviously, this will change. Imagine playing two lineups that are much closer together. So let's say we do this. Okay, I'm going to close this down. I'm going to leave this up over here because I'm going to run in lineup HQ. Go to the stacks page instead of switching back and forth between windows. I'm not going to give Texas stacks or Tiger stacks. I'm just going to run a couple of lineups to see what stacks. 5x. What the top number of unique players won. Just I want what are the top 10 lineups. See if there's two different stacks. Okay, so I ran. So we get the Rangers line. We get the Rangers. We get the Rangers. Do we get anything that's not the Rangers based on the back projections? No, I'm just looking for. Okay, we're not getting anything else. Let me run even more lineups. Oh, we'd maybe get something more. Okay, I'll put it back on lineup HQ. Okay, so we're just trying to find like the top Rangers stack lineup, and then the top whatever the next stack is. Right, stack summary. Still getting 100%. Still getting all the Rangers. Okay, 2 hitter stacks over here. Can we get anything other than the Rangers today in the back projections as of 10:45? Okay, let's put it on 300. Are we really going to get 300 Ranger stacks before we get anything else? Well, we'll see. If you got any questions in the chat, feel free to post them in. Wade asks if I think that Judge is going to be worth it tonight. I don't know what's going to happen. DFS is not figuring out what's going to happen. About building better lineups than your opponents. Adrian A says, I won 2001 stacking against Scherzer like 3 years ago when he was the best in the game. It doesn't make sense, but it works. I love this analysis. You shouldn't get out of this that this is you stack against Rodon. You should get out of this that two lineups that are within 6 median points of each other, 7 median points of each other, aren't that dramatically. Yes, there's 60-40 or so. Right? As you go down in projection, obviously that the percentages will increase. The differences between lineups that you could play in DFS, especially for large field GPPs, are not as dramatic as you think. That when you go, oh, okay, I can't fade this guy, I can't fade that pitcher, I can't fade that stack, I can't play that stack, I can't play that guy, I can't take this 3% owned pitcher. Well, just use this tool. Pit the two lineups against each other and go, wow, okay, the difference between these two lineups isn't as dramatic as I thought. Is it different? Yeah, but it's not as dramatic as I thought. Shannon Lambert thinks those Rangers are going to be 20+% owned. On a 15-game slate, it's probably over-owned. Why are the Rangers projecting well today? Let's see. I don't know, because I haven't even looked at the slate. Oh, because they're in Colorado. Okay, now I get it. Now we get it. Now we get some, Lowe and Heim and Tavares, all these guys that are under 3K. Yeah, it's the classic first game in Coors and DraftKings forgets. Okay, now I see why. So I'm running 300. In the first 300 lineups, do we get a lineup that isn't a Texas stack? All right, let's stop it here. Let's see. I'm just trying to find the next highest. Right, stack summer. No, 270. Yeah, of course. No, all to Texas. Okay, so what I'm going to have to do is let's put it down to 20, and just at least put stacks of Texas. Where's Texas? No more than 50%. So we get something else to deal with. Right, because Shannon Lambert says because you easily get core stacks with high price pitchers on DK. I'm just doing this just so we could find two lineups that are close enough, that are close enough in projection but different in players. So yes, we got a lot of Tigers here, a lot of Rangers here. Delete other builds. Okay, so let's see what's the top as of now. What's the top Ranger stack? Because obviously the projection's updated a bit. Okay, so let's eliminate. Okay, the Royals apparently are next. Okay, so we got the Texas stack. So let's get rid of the ones underneath it. So we get the highest Texas stack. So I'm just looking for 2 lineups. Okay, there's the Texas stack. And let's say, what's the highest Rangers stack? What's the highest Royals? What am I talking about? Okay. This is just all based on the bat projections as of now. Go through. Okay, so we got the 2 lineups. Okay, so we got this Rangers stack. Rodon Ray 5X. And we got this Royals. Melendez, Massey, Dozier, Witt, Michael Taylor. With Benintendi, Acuna. How many players does it share? 1, 2, 3 with Lowe. 3 with Lowe and Acuna down here. That's what it looks like. 4. It shares 4 players. So out of the 10 lineup spots, it's a 6v6. Okay, so let's plug these 2 lineups in. One has a median of 113. One has a median of 111.65. So like a 1.5 point difference in projection, in median projection. So I'm going to export these 2 lineups. Let's stop the screen and share the Excel document. Where are we? There we go. Okay. So I'm going to export these 2. Open. Okay. I'm going to plug in the first one. Plug in the first one up here. Plug in the second one down here. So the first one is the top Ranger stack. The second one is the top Royals stack lineup. Plug them in. Lineup 1 is obviously going to be a little bit better. But the differences in the win percentage between the 2 aren't that dramatic. One seems to have a higher floor. Let's plug this in again and run another 2,500. Okay, maybe the second one, right? Here, look, the second one won in the 2,500 simulations. Just a little bit more. Okay, let's plug it in again. Right? They're not as dramatically different as you think. Right? Let's run it again. 49-48. Right? Lineup 1 ended up with 169 as its ceiling and a lower floor. This one ended a little bit differently on the other way around. So if we compare these 2 lineups together and we just keep on running and just looking and running, it's like lineup 1 seems to beat out lineup 2, probably maybe a little bit more, but in some 2,500 runs, it's the other way around. Is there that dramatic of a difference between these 2 lineups? Not as dramatic as you would think. Even though one is playing the Chalk Ranger stack and the next one is playing the Royals. Now, if we compare that to the ownership of these 2 lineups, it's like, well, one is 30 percentage points lower in total ownership, which is a blunt way of doing it. So it's like, well, let's say you were playing a single entry 121 or something like that. If this lineup was going to be even more owned in single entry, why wouldn't you play the second lineup? Just play the Royals. We could concede the fact that lineup 1 with the Rangers is a better median lineup. I'll concede that fact. I mean, it's said. We have the numbers to show it. But in running 2,500 simulations, which is not a million simulations, but at least something, that the lineups are much closer than you think they are. They're not as dramatic as you think. So this tool, it's basically, we're giving you in the advanced players version of Theory of DFS. It's coming with Excel tools. You'll get this. You will get this. You don't have to build it yourself. We'll make it so that you could not only plug in 2 lineups, you could plug in 5 lineups. You could plug in 10 lineups. I think 10 is going to be the max. That you could change the percentile threshold of because then you're going to get outliers if you don't cut off. Yeah, you have to add a little bit of randomness for these Monte Carlo sims. So let's say you're deciding between, okay, let me take a look at 5 lineups together and run them against each other and multiple times and go, okay, Are these lineups that dramatically different than I think? Are they? Are they not? Am I wasting the tons of time trying to decide between 5 lineups that are practically the same? You don't know. Run the Sims and find out. Well, this is not a robust. This is not running contest simulations. You're not running the entire 121 single entry. You're not trying to extrapolate lineups based on the ownership and then run the contest as a full contest. All of the lineups in the contest. I'm not even sure if you'd be able to even do that in Excel. You can do that in Excel. Whether or not your computer will blow up or the time constraint on it would be stupid. Like maybe for the smaller contests, you were running a 10-man contest. Maybe you could do it in Excel within a reasonable time frame. You're trying to run a large field GPP and run every lineup. First you have to extrapolate lineups. Then you have to run all the lineups, and you have to and then you have to assign the payouts, and then add you'd be sitting there for you plug it in, and you'd be sitting there for an hour or two. Right? For a large field count, I don't know, maybe all day. The spinning ball, the beach ball will be just here. But we could do something this simple, which is not available. You really can't find a little like lineup simulator like this anywhere. That you can plug anything you want. I mean, this is not just for baseball. Like we just left spots that like, okay, plug as long as you plug in your projections, which you can cut and paste right out of you could download right out of lineup HQ. And you can just run lineups against each other in a little simulation. Why the hell not? You're trying to decide between two things. And obviously, like I mentioned before about how many players are shared between the two lineups, that the differences of the results between the two lineups are going to be higher or wider the more different the players are between the two lineups. And that's kind of part of the advanced course as well. Using a basic version of combinatorics to gain relative value on your opponents. Adrian A., is there a way to see how often the so-called top stack actually wins? It seems that like it rarely does. The top stack does rarely win. It wins the most amount of time for the number of teams on the slate. You would have to run full simulations. Like this simulation is a simple simulation. You'd have to run a full simulation of every stack, every combination of every stack. We have that at RotoGrinders. It's called Slate IQ, where we run those simulations. So we could see, let's see, where's Slate IQ? It's probably not out yet today. Can I find RotoGrinders Slate IQ? Let's find a previous version. Right, I'm just looking for whatever, for August 24th. For Monday, August. Okay, this was old. 2 years ago. No, we don't even have okay, it's not even plugged in. But yeah, we run this based on our plate IQ projections. On a 15-game slate, right? We have a 15-game slate today? 16, 15, a lot of games. The top stack will win 18% of the time, which means it doesn't win 82% of the time because 2% it's this, and 3% it's that, and 1% it's that. It still wins more of the time. But how many teams are on this slate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. If I told you the Texas Rangers have a chance of being the top stack 20% of the time, that is the highest. That's the top stack. The next best team is maybe 8% of the time. We may have like Detroit, maybe 1% of the time. So it's say, okay, the Rangers are the top stack. They win the most amount of times out of 30 teams, which means 20% of the time they're the top stack, and 80% of the time, it's one of the other 29 teams. So it's like, oh, they rarely win. Yeah, they no one says that they win the most. And 20% is high for the top stack. For a top stack percentage, if you ran the simulations on a 15-game slate. The top stack on most slates is 12%, right? 10 to 14%, something like that. So let's say the top stack was 10%. That means the next top stack is what, 9%? 8%? You have some at 5%. So the top stack is 10% of the time. Oh, and it didn't come in. Oh, it feels as if 9 out of 10 times the top stack isn't the top stack. And what you're just stating the obvious. Well, the top stack's only 10% chance. It's just higher than the other. It's the highest out of how many teams are on the slate. One stack is 10%, the next stack is 8%. What's the difference between the two? This much? So if the Rangers were 20%, that means 80% of the time, some other team is the top stack. 20% is a lot on a slate. So if 10%. What's the difference between the top stack being 10% and one of the other stacks halfway down the list is 5%? It's only the top stack twice as often as the other team. 90%. It means 90% of the time it's one of the other teams. Shannon Lambert says you could fit in Verlander Ray with the 5-man Rangers and 3-man Astros tonight on TK. Yes, you could do what I would suggest on a 15-game slate. I wouldn't have any problem just Xing out the Rangers, depending on the ownership. If everyone's going to be doing that, it's such a big slate, and the Rangers don't even have that dramatic of a team total. Like in comparison, and the Astros have a higher team total, Colorado has a higher team total. Yeah, well, there are a lot of low team totals. Well, Atlanta's 4.75. The Yankees, the Blue Jays, right? I'd have no problem if I was playing single entry and maybe just X out the Rangers. So I just wanted to show you one of the tools that is going to be included in the advanced players version of the theory of daily fantasy sports. Showing that off throughout the week. Tomorrow we got Grinders live in the morning, so there'll be no pregame show. I'll be on it, but we got an early slate tomorrow. But as these tools, as long as you have Excel, you can run all these things. You could build this yourself, or you could just get it as part of the package. It's coming out by the time the NFL starts. I don't want to promise next week. Our aim is next week, but I don't want to promise. You should go out before you get that and get the first version, the starter version, the 15-hour audio DFS masterclass, the theory of daily fantasy sports, how to think like a professional DFS player. 15 hours long. It applies to any sport. You can see the table of contents here. Go to theoryofdfs.com. Remember, DFS is a game. You play it as a game. As long as you have everything compiled down into numbers, really is not really about sports anymore, right? So that's what I did. I mean, look at the little tool here. Like you do this for any sport, fine. We could go into the PGA projections. You just plug in the PGA projections here, right, to this sheet. Then you plug in whatever lineups here, and it'll run a simulation for you. A smaller simulation, 2,500. Can we get it up to 10,000? Can we get? I don't know if the difference between 2,500 and 10,000 is worth it. Because we want to make it quick, make it as quick as possible. So that should be coming out within the next 2 weeks. Give me those thummy thumbs on your way out the door. Thummy thumbs, you know how much I love the thummy thumbs. They'll cover the entire MLB slate later today on Grinders Live. Grinders Live. Coming up at 5 o'clock Eastern. Then Crunch Time follows that. Kevin Roth will probably have to give an update. I don't know if is there any weather going on today? Any weather issues on today's slate? Let's take a look quickly. Maybe the Boston game, right? Maybe the Yankee game, maybe. So not much for a 15-game slate, really not as much as I would have thought. But he'll be breaking that down all for you. Get real-time updates on the weather. They'll be going around the horn, giving their picks, their plays, their everything. We got stuff going on the Scores and Odds YouTube channel. Grant's over there with live locks, and I'll be back tomorrow on Grinders Live, and then on Thursday again. Hopefully, I'll show off another tool, another Excel tool that you will get. It is part of the package of the advanced players version of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It'll have another, 10 to 15 hours worth of audio. Have a whole bunch of these little Excel tools for you to use. And make it so much more easier and more efficient for you to actually win and profit at Daily Fantasy Sports. So I'll be back next time. I'll answer any questions you want on any of these tools, any of the course, anything you want. And we'll go over some stuff again. We'll review. We'll answer DFS strategy questions like I'll always do on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.